Good afternoon and good morning or good evening to our watcher. I am Rachel Bibalolot, the leader of Group 1. And for today's subject, it's about creative nonfiction. Topic, we are gonna tackle about the elements of creative nonfiction. Firstly, we have fact. The writing must be based on fact rather than fiction and it cannot be made up. Because of course, our topic is about nonfiction and it should be based on reality and not fantasy. And it cannot be made up. It needs to be based on personal experiences and not just a mere fiction or something like that. Second is we have extensive research. The piece of a writing is based on primary research, such as an interview or personal experience, and often secondary research, such as gathering information from books, magazine, and newspaper. Now, in making a nonfiction novel, an extensive research must be done. And with this, you can do an interview about personal experience and also even do researches by gathering information from book or in a library. Reportage or reporting is the third part. The writer must be able to document events or personal experience because with this, the writer can easily make a novel about a person's life or even his own life. And fourth is about personal experience and personal opinion. Often, the writer includes personal experience, feeling, thoughts, and opinions. For instance, when writing a personal essay or memoir. Well, if it's a nonfiction novels, of course, a writer must include their experience, feelings, thoughts, and opinion based on their point of view. Now on to our fifth element, explanation or exposition. The writer is required to explain the personal experience or topic to the reader. So as a writer, you are not just gonna write anything in the story without telling, without explaining your topic to the reader. And lastly, we have essay format. Creative nonfiction is often written in essay format. Keep that in mind. For example, personal essay, literary journalistic essay, and brief essay. So, when you hear the word nonfiction, always keep in mind that it is an essay format. Now, on to the literary elements used in creative nonfiction. And so, here are the lists. Firstly, we have character. Second, details, dialogue, diction, figurative language, flashback, flash forward, foreshadowing, imagery, motif, narrative, order, plot and plot structure, point of view, setting, scene and atmosphere, style, symbol, theme, and lastly, tone. Now on to character. Every story has a character, but in nonfiction, these characters are real people. In order to make the work relatable or empathetic, nonfiction authors often follow the same convention as fiction authors and develop characters that catch the reader's attention. The author described physical description, personal traits, and detailed histories to give the character depth and relatability. So, the nonfiction piece often requires a main character. If a writer is creating his or her memoir, then the writer is the central character. Now, on
Now
to the next
next,
part,
we
which is
have
details.
details.
Details provide
Details
pieces of
provide pieces
information.
of information.
Writers of biography and
Writers of
autobiography
biography and
use details to
autobiography
give the
use
actual fact
details to
about
give the
a
actual
person's
fact
life.
about a person's
Biographies
life.
do more than just
Biographies
relate
do more
details. However,
than
the details you choose, arrange, and examine help
Now
communicate your
next,
own
we
opinion
have
and character as well
details.
as those as
Details
your
provide
subject.
pieces of
Keep that in
information.
mind. Writers of biography
So, dialogue is a literary and theatrical form consisting of a written or spoken conversational exchange between two or more diamonds through or across people. It is the conversation between characters in a narrative. It is the lines of passages in drama which are intended to be spoken. And fiction and creative nonfiction. Dialogue is typically enclosed within quotation mark. It plays characters' speech and preceded by their names. So here are the function of dialogue. Number one, it moves the action along in a work and it also helps to characterize the personality of the speakers, jobs, social classes, and educations. Number two, it also gives literature a moral, natural, conversational flow which makes it more readable and enjoyable. Number three, by showcasing human interaction, dialogue prevents literature from being nothing more than a list of description and actions. Four, dialogue varies in structures and tone depending on the people participating in the conversation and the mode that the author is trying to maintain his or her writing. So diction is the writer's choice of words. The author chooses each word carefully so that both its meaning and sound contribute to the tone and feelings of the literary works. The author must consider as word denotations its definitions according to the dictionary and its connotations, the emotions, thoughts, and ideas associated with and evoked by the word. A work's diction forms one of the essentially important literary elements. As writer, use words to convey actions, reveal characters, imply attitudes, identify themes, and suggestions values. We can speak of the diction's particular. We can also reverse to a poet's dictions and represented over the body of his or her work as Donnes or Hugg's diction.
Language is a type of language that varies from the norms of literary language, in which words means exactly what they say, for the sake of comparison, emphasis, clarity, or freshness. Sometimes writers resort to sound effect device to make the writing sound good and not just communicate mere information, also known as the ornaments of language. Figurative language does not mean exactly what it says, but instead force the reader to make an imaginative leap in order to comprehend an author's points. Usually involves comparison between two things that may not at first seem to relate to another and can facilitate understanding because it is relates something unfamiliar to something familiar. To comprehend figurative language, it will require you to use imagination to figure out the writer's points or meaning. There is detailed discussion or figurative language after this section. So, so the next flashback is a literary device in which an earlier or past events inserted into the present or the normal chronological order of a narrative. Various methods may be used present this literary device. Among them are recollection of characters, narration by the character dream sequence, and reverse. Flashback, often used to recount events that happened before the story. Backstory.
Hello, uy. Tama na to eh. Stop na.
Flash forward or prolepsis is a literacy device in which the plot goes ahead of time, i.e., is a scene that interrupts and takes the narrative forward in time from the current time in a story. Generally, a flash forward represents expected of or image event in the future and interjected in the main plot, revealing the important part of the story that are yet to occur. It is a opposite of flashback or analysis and reveals past event. Foreshadowing is a literacy device is a which author hits certain plot development that perhaps will come to be a later in the story. It is the presentation of material in a work in a such a way that later events are prepared for the purpose of the foreshadowing is to prepare the reader or viewer for action to come to the to to foreshadow as an event in a story. The audience is a given direct and or subtle clues about what will happen. Imagine imagine this scene. This is an example. A professionally addressed woman hurriedly leave the house, slamming the front door. She frantically searching for her keys in the bottom of giant. First will glancing a briefcase under her other arm. She find her key, get it the car, and back out of the driveway. As the car drive away, the camera moves back. The camera moves back toward to the front door and into the house where a USB stick is sitting on a shelf next to the front door. In this scene, the situation is the same, but the details are different. It shows us to us USB stick forgotten by the woman which foreshadow future conflict.
So, next is imagery. Imagery refers to the pictures which we perceive with our minds, ears, nose, tongue, skin, and through which we experience the duplicate word created by poetic language. Imagery evokes the meaning of truth, of human experience, not in abstract term, as in philosophy, but in more perceptible and tangible forms. So, this device by which the poet make his meaning strong, clear, and sure. So, the poet uses sound words and words of colors and touch in addition to figures of speech. As well, concrete details that appeal to the reader's senses to use to build up images. Motif. Motif is any element, subject, idea, or concept that is constantly present through the entire body of literature. Using a motif refers to the repetition of a specific term, dominating the literary work. So, motifs are very noticeable and play a significant role in defining.
Narrative nonfiction's writing usually follows a timeline for a narrative that is either linear or nonlinear depending on how the author tells the story. Authors can choose to tell a story from start to finish or jump from one time to another to create parallels to other characters or events. The author carefully chooses a narrative to enhance any dramatization. In most nonfiction, the story told focuses on a central conflict or theme that defines the purpose of the work. In writing nonfiction, rather than just reportage, you are going to borrow from fictional techniques to tell the story in an interesting and very human way. The best story display a common structure characterized by the rising action that builds interest to peak before falling again toward a satisfying resolution. This structure mirrors the shape of the most rewarding experience in life. So it is not surprising that stories follow this structure. Use narrative structure whenever you want to tell a story or narrative trail or imagine. Next, order. Order is the arrangement of event in work of literature. It is the structure of something, is the way that things it put together in nonfiction. It's the way things are organized. The you the way you organize information impact how your audience receive it. The, the six informational structures below will help you organize your information in clear, easy to follow manner. Six information.
Now let's move on to plot and structure. The writer needs to be able to tell his or her story. A good story includes an inciting incident, a goal, challenges and obstacles, a turning point, and resolution of the story. Plot refers to the series of sequence of events that gives a story its meaning and effect. Quiz on plot. Every story has a plot, or a sequence of events. There are 5 to a good plot. Beginning, the story begins and characters are introduced. Rising action. Sometimes, something happens to make the story more interesting. The characters have a problem. Next is the climax, the most suspenseful part of the story. The characters must finally face their problems and make decisions. Falling action. The character has made a decision about how to handle the problem, and now the story is coming to a close. Last is the end. The story concludes as the action comes to an end. Next is the point of view. Point of view refers to the perspective from which a story is told. When a character in the story is telling the story, it is first-person point of view. When the story is told by a narrator outside the story, it is called third-person point of view. The narrator of a story can have a omniscient or limited view. Omniscient means all-knowing. If the narrator has an omniscient point of view, then he knows what is going on in the minds of all the characters at all times. The reader gets to know what every character is thinking and feeling. If the narrator has a limited in 2 ways, first person point of view, where a character in the story is telling a story, is limited. The character only knows what is happening when he or she is and can only describe how he or she feels. Third person point of view can be limited if the narrator shadows on one of the characters. So the narrator is not in the story, but he or she only describes the action surrounding a specific character. The first person point of view, day when the bus came, I got on, carrying my pink backpack. It was the first of school, and I was nervous. I smiled, though when I saw my best friend Kevin sitting in the back. The third person, limited point of view. When the bus came, Sharon got on, carrying her pink backpack. It was the first day of school, and Sharon was nervous. She smiled, though when she saw her best friend Kevin sitting in the back. Omniscient point of view. When the bus came, Sharon got on, carrying her pink backpack. It was the first day of school, and Sharon was nervous. She smiled, though when she saw her best friend Kevin sitting in the back. Kevin was nervous too, so he was thrilled to see Sharon. Maybe this day would not be so bad after all.
Now on to setting, scene, and atmosphere. The elements making up a setting are the geographical location, its topography, scenery, and such physical arrangement as the location of the window and doors in a room, the occupation and the daily manner of living of the character, the the time of the period in which the action takes place. For example, period in history, or season of the year, the general environment of the character. For example, religious, mental, moral, social, and emotional condition. The writer creates scenes that are action-oriented and contains vivid description, setting, in the story's time and place. Now on to the fundamental elements of the setting.
Now, let's move on to style. Style refers to the language convention used to construct the story. A writer can manipulate diction, sentence, structure, phrasing, dialogue, and other aspects of language to create style. Style is the manner of expression of a particular writer produced by choice of words, grammatical structure, use of literary devices, and all of the possible parts of language use. Style is the way a writer uses words to create literature. It is difficult to enjoy a story's character or plot without enjoying the author's style. The style of the author is, is as important as what he is trying to say. Next is the symbol. Symbol is a literary device that contains several layers of meaning, often concealed at first sight, and is representative of several other aspects, concepts, or traits than those that are visible in the literal translation alone. It is using an object or action that means something more than its literal meaning. The ability to recognize and interpret symbols requires experience in literary readings, perception and tact. It is easy to run wild with symbols, to find symbols everywhere. The ability to interpret symbols is essential to fully understand and enjoy of literature. Symbols come from the Greek word symbol. It is a word or an object that stands for another word or object. The object or word can be seen with the eye or not visible. For helpful suggestion,
so now let's move on to them. Them is the meaning or concept we are left with after reading a piece or writing. It can be a revelation of human character, or it may be stated briefly or at great length. It develops from the interplay of character and plot. A them is the central and unifying concept of the story. It must adhere to the following requirements. First, it must account for all the major details of the story. 2. It must not be contradicted by any detail of the story. 3. It must not rely on supposed facts, facts not actually stated or clearly implied by the story. A them is not the moral of the story. A them is the author's way of communicating and sharing ideas, perceptions, and feelings with readers, and it may be directly stated in the text, or it may only be implied. Next is tone. Tone is the writer's attitude towards his or her subject matter. For example, the tone of a biography can be admiring or critical, fawning or style. Tone. Tone is the writer's attitude toward his or her subject matter. For example, The tone of a biography can be admiring or critical, fawning or hostile. Many biographers start with a reverential attitude toward their subject, become antagonistic as the work bogs down, and end on a worshipful tone. For instance, if the author is listening reasons and answering likely objections in advance, the tone is argumentative or persuasive. If the writer goes on and on about the snowy, picture perfect holidays of childhood, nostalgia is a good bit.